Have you ever felt like no matter how successful you become, you still feel like you have to prove yourself?
Or like you're constantly over preparing, overperforming, and overthinking just to feel credible in the room?
Today's conversation honestly puts into patterns I think so many women, especially women in real estate and entrepreneurship, experience but rarely talk out loud about.
Yes. So we're talking about survival identities. These are the hidden rules women navigate in wealth building spaces and why so many high achieving women stay stuck in survival mode even without realizing it.
Welcome to the SARE Ladies podcast. This is where Asian American Pacific Islander women carve out their own space in real estate and shake up the status quo. Join your hosts, Anita Wong and Ashley Cow, as they dive deep into bold strategies, personal growth, and everything it takes to own it. From building wealth to boosting confidence. Let's jump in.
Hey there, welcome back to SARE Ladies podcast, where we have honest conversations about wealth, identity, entrepreneurship, investing, and what it actually looks like to build a life outside of the traditional mold.
Yes. So today we're joined by Dr. Amy Chang, a longtime member of the Sarah and Sarah Ladies community and founder of Transforma. Amy has long worked with Fortune 500 companies across tech, energy, and financial services, where she began researching the hidden patterns behind how people lead, perform, and make decisions under pressure. Recently, Amy came out with her new book, Survival Identity, which we are here to talk about, along with some of the unwritten rules women and people of color navigate in high performance industries like real estate and the emotional cost of high performance.
Yeah, I really like this conversation. I think it was really our first deep dive into this topic and learning about Amy's dissertation and learning about what she has researched in her doctorate, learning about hidden patterns that shape who we are as leaders and patterns that we have learned from our childhood and how it takes shape in who we are, who we work with, how we shape the work culture around us. I also really love the part of the conversation where we talked about inherited survival patterns, whether it's inherited based on our family, our cultural backgrounds, and how that shapes the way that we women look at risk and see success.
Yeah, and I feel like this conversation and just reading her book, there were some like really hard truths that I had to face about my identity and how I resonated with this survival identity that she lays out. And so, I mean, she talks about like how industries, like many of the industries that I've worked in and that we're familiar with, like real estate, were built by bros, right? And so, women trying to come into these industries initially, like she talked about in the 80s, women used to wear like large shoulder pads just to feel like and look like men and feel like they belong in the industry a little bit more. And so I thought that was
Mhm.
really interesting. And then we also talked about just like the physical and emotional feeling of the difference between like wealth from survival and wealth from alignment. And so I thought that was a really interesting conversation. And then finally, we kind of talked about just like the tactical stuff. So she talks about her Forma framework and what you can do today to help you break away from these survival identities.
Yes, I'm excited to have y'all listen to it. So let's get into it. Hi, Amy. Welcome to the SARE Ladies podcast. Congratulations. Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me today.
So how long did it take you to write this book?
I would say that it's been like a long, long time because this is the work that I wanted to produce like back in the late 20, in like around 2010, even because I had this idea during my first master's program, and I never could have the right words to express it. And I just feel like over time I've been able to build the language to talk about this, and then now I feel like we're in a moment of really asking questions about ourselves, and I feel like now I finally have the ability to put words to all this.
Yeah, I really, really love this book. I mean, my copy, which thankfully, thanks so much for sending us one of these, has
Yeah.
just like all of these highlights in it. And I just had to sit with so many of these things, especially with my husband. I've been talking about the fact that I've I've been just sitting with it that I'm a people pleaser. I mean, I
Oh
knew
gosh.
it. I like knew it all along, but like now I like know it, you know. Ashley, do you know what you are?
I'm definitely a people pleaser too.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, damn it, I know it. It was like a hard truth,
Yeah. And then my husband is the controller, and I was like, oh my God, I feel like with Amy's book, I just realized we're just like the chemistry pods that like work
Yeah.
together. We're like just like the molecules that like automatically fasten to each other. So, I feel like you like unwound like 7 years of therapy
Oh
and
God.
executive work. So it is an excellent book if this is kind of your thing, if you love kind of reading about leadership, about your own personal leadership style. And I love it because I feel like, Amy, you kind of came from a place where I mean, I read your introduction, about
Right.
how this came from your own family. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit before we dive in?
I mean, yeah. So I grew up in a really traditional Chinese household. Like I'm gonna say Chinese patriarchal household. And my dad was really dominant in his viewpoints about women and specifically. So we, as in my mom and my three sisters, we all had to comply with his idea about what acceptable was. So I grew up as someone who had people pleasing, I recognize, like, I think that happens to a lot of women, but in me, it looks like control and analyzing, like, as my tendencies, because I was trying to manage for my own safety in that environment. But when I got to like the workplace, I actually also found that, there was a context that I wanted to feel validation from. So in retrospect, I was also a people pleaser in the workplace. And it's a reflection all of it is a reflection of the difference of power that I experienced as a woman as well as an immigrant.
Wow. So let's dive in. So survival identity, the book is called Survival Identity.
Yeah.
What is a survival identity in plain terms?
Yeah. So the survival identity is the version of yourself that you built to keep yourself safe under pressure. It comes about in an environment like maybe when you're young. There's rules about who gets to belong and who gets to feel safe and how does that look like. And those rules, like usually they're unspoken, but they're made really obvious to us, right? And like I just mentioned, it can come from family, but it also comes from the larger societies that we operate within and the bodies that we have. And so, therefore, it's about the power dynamic and the power relationship that we have in those contexts. So, it's basically a strategy that works, right? Because it got you to this moment. But the problem is that it was built for a younger version of you and you're still running that strategy in the present moment. My hypothesis or my theory is that it's actually conditioning and it covers up a layer of you that's actually more authentic, like the version of you that came to Earth to be. At some point, you outgrow that context, but you're still running that old version of yourself.
Yeah, talk more about that like version of yourself that you were meant to be. So it's like we're kind of covered in our trauma and our survival tactics and how we survived in our first years as children. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's I just call it survival identity because I try not to get in the trauma language, even though that does inform this. It's just an adaptation of like this is you doing your best when you were little, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna be the smart one in this situation. And that looks like in my case, that looks like a combination of control and analysis around how I'm going to navigate this. And I know that in my environment, that's going to be affirmed and that's going to keep me feeling safe. And so then I end up saying, okay, well, and I keep going in life, I do well in school, let's say. And then I just go into like my adult life and it's just like, well, this worked for me. There's no reason to question it. And then we go into like our next decades like that without really always being super aware of it. And when I work, I sit across from clients, I notice that this is also what creates a ceiling for them, because it's like, oh, I've been this person for so long, I don't know how to be anything else. And that's where the conversation begins.
Yeah. But I like how you talk about it. It's a learned behavior, right? These
Yeah.
are things that you learn by repetition,
Mhm.
and therefore it is something that can also be unwound or unlearned.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the gift, right? Like the fact that it was an adaptation that you learned at one time, and because you learned it, you could also unlearn it and actually create something new for yourself.
Yeah. So when did you realize high-performing women were operating from these survival identities?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I sit across from a lot of leaders, and I realized that there's a phenomenon of people hitting their career ceilings, right? Because they keep operating in that version of their own survival identity. So let's talk about people pleasing as like one of the patterns. Let's say a person who is really skilled at people pleasing as a child, they become like adults that are just really good at reading people, for instance, and like making other people comfortable. But then doing that and being that version of self, there's a cost, right? Maybe they don't always offer their perspective or opinions in like high risk environments, like meetings, like big company meetings, or as accurately, because they have just spent so many years, maybe even decades, making themselves small or palatable, like making people comfortable because it kept them safe at one time. And it even made them successful in their careers, but it ends up being like the performance of an old strategy that no longer serves who they are today. Because normally when I'm sitting across from them, they're just like, I don't know how to be anything else. I've been doing this for so long. And then that's what that's what drives the conversation around what else is possible.
So what do you tell your clients when they say that? Like, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to be anyone else.
Mhm. I would say like we go towards, really exploring like how is it that they want to show up in these contexts, and how do they want to be a leader. Normally it's about a leadership question. So how do they want to show up as a leader? Because they haven't yet really seen themselves as a leader in a new way. They've just always assumed that this is how they're going to be. And so really we do a lot of exploration around what is possible and how they want to show up.
So was there a moment in your own life where you were saying, this person that is coming out in my workplace, like, this isn't actually me. This is who I learned to become to survive.
Like, I feel that, back in, let's say, like 2010, when I was originally thinking about this question, I didn't really have words for it. The only way I could articulate it was, do you remember back in the 80s? I don't know if you're even that old, how there were women who would wear big shoulder pads to mimic men in the workplace. And that was, to me, like, I don't think it was a fashion choice. It was a way of trying to look like a peer to men in order to be the equivalent of them in order to like be respected. And I was just like, I can't quite name exactly what's going on here, but they're trying to do it in their bodies in terms of showing up as an equal. And then, of course, I think women also did similar, like in terms of behavior, like whether it's coming across a certain way as decisive and blah, 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 and blah, 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 because these workplaces are shaped by not women. Right. And so it's like, how did people like try to navigate the workplace when they don't actually hold power in that workplace? And that became like an always like long-term question for me.
Yeah, that I just imagine, like, I mean, there's so many things, right? How women are constantly sort of be told to be more masculine. I'm just even thinking about being you're writing your email shorter, not writing your emails not as feminine, right? Taking whatever you were thinking about writing, then cutting it up, and then until it's like a fifth of what you were going to write, and then you send that one out, right? I feel like I learned that one, I mean, in business school, but I can sense that, like, how do you become someone to be more fitting into the workplace, in a place of power, in a position of power? Yeah.
That's right. That's right. You edit yourself is what you do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So So after having worked with so many clients and having 20 years working with people from the Fortune 500 companies, what pattern kept showing up that made you know this book needed to exist?
So I think, in general society these days, we're constantly talking about like being in survival mode, or we used to be in survival mode. But I just feel like I haven't directly heard anyone discuss how to move beyond it, right? Like we can name the fact that it exists in us and in our bodies, but we haven't really been able to articulate like the how getting out of it. And I often hear that therapy or coaching as a way in which people can navigate this, right? But the problem is that the need for therapy sometimes makes a person feel pathologized, and sometimes they experience shame, right?
Mhm.
So, the it sounds like something is wrong with them, right? So like by taking this angle, I feel that we're changing the paradigm around where the shame exists, because in my opinion, if anything, the shame belongs with the systems that benefit from our smallness. And what I'm trying to argue is that there is nothing wrong with people. You adapted the best you could when you were little. And what I did was just put together a framework that allows people to navigate this shift, this change to a more empowered, authentic self.
Mm, I love that. Kind of rediverting, like it is the system that you were being put into rather than, who you were, and, you did your best. Yeah.
Right.
And I love that it's something, you learned that you inherited. And I think about that too in your stories about, just like what you inherit as immigrant families, right? These stories of survival and what, it's also not to their fault or your parents' fault, because that's also what they inherited, and they had to do what they had to survive.
Right.
So I guess I want to divert to talking about, real estate. So why do industries like real estate, finance, tech intensify survival identities for women and people of color?
Yeah. So I think the question behind the question is who gets to shape this environment? When you have like tech bros or like finance bros shaping the workspace, then who gets seen is going to be a question. The initial strategy, as we talked about earlier, is about be more like them, but you're female, right? Or be more like them, but you have an accent or your skin is brown, right? So who gets to be included, whether the bros see you as one of them is a question, right? And the problem is that the landscape in these workspaces were all shaped by the bros in the first place. So we are left trying to adapt and make ourselves fit the structures because that we didn't have power to shape in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. So let's go into these unwritten rules you mentioned. What are these unwritten rules women learn very quickly in wealth building spaces like real estate?
Yeah. So I had to do a little research. So first of all, what my understanding is that women make up. So I'm just going to use a lot of statistics throughout all of real estate. Women make up 60% of real estate agents, but only 14% of the leadership within the industry. Women in commercial real estate are paid 30% less than their male counterparts, and that gap is even bigger for women of color. And women in real estate commonly report being quoted higher prices by contractors than male peers. And on the investor side, women in real estate investing consistently describe the space as being very bro-y, and you could feel it when there are no other women in the room. So that means women have learned to come across as competent, but not threatening, and they have to have opinions, but not be difficult, right? They have to be visible, but not take up too much space. You hear all the contradictions. Be confident, but make sure everyone else is comfortable. And these rules are never stated because they're enforced through tone. They're enforced through who gets to be invited back into certain conversations and through which deals actually close.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, I think that we, here started at SARE Ladies because we didn't see anyone that looked like us in the commercial real estate space. And it's honestly truly rare. Honestly, the only Asian women that are in the room are often me and Ashley. I will just say, especially because we're always in Dallas. This is our stomping ground, but it's almost just always us. And you can also immediately feel that you're just kind of being herded in like a sea of white men in blue suits, and you're noticed, of course. You're the one that's different, but you're also not quite in. And so,
Right.
I love that too, right? Just because, we want to build a space, especially in commercial real estate, is like what you said, is like there is a predominant space for women in residential real estate, maybe even like house, not even house hacking, but it's, like fix and flips, yeah, would say so, but less so in the commercial real estate, and where real wealth, real institutional power sit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, why do so many competent women still feel like they have to prove themselves?
I think it comes down to one thing, whether the people who shape the industry accept you as a peer. When the acceptance feels conditional or like almost, you never stop performing that thing called competence. You just get better at it.
Yeah, what behaviors get rewarded in high performance industries even when they're costing you your mental health?
So over delivering, anticipating everyone's needs before they even ask, or kind of similar to what we talked about with the broy field, like never showing uncertainty, like kind of like this outrageous level of confidence. Another thing is absorbing conflict without complaint. So when you're performing this version of yourself, it serves other people, or like the whole system without it ever being named. And someone benefits from you over delivering or like absorbing the conflict without complaint. And when you're the one that's and oh sorry, and ultimately you're the one left with the burnout or the desire to have better work-life balance or feeling like you're handcuffed to a job because this is your means to income and stability.
Hmm. Do you think a lot of ambitious women confuse survival with ambition?
I would say, yeah, because survival identity can look like drive, like having high standards and initiative. But the difference is genuine ambition. It feels like expansive, right? Like you're moving towards something. Whereas survival, usually you could feel it in your body. Like it feels like something clamping down on you and you're doing your best to move away from a threat. Right. So that's that you could sort of like tell in your body when it's actually more about your authentic ambition versus something that's you're trying to protect yourself from. A lot of women I work with, and I'll especially speak to Asian women here, have been running hard their whole careers. So when you ask them what they actually want, they kind of go quiet because they haven't known themselves beyond the
Mm.
performance.
Yeah, I love that. I I definitely see that in a lot of our community, and even just myself, right? You are performing to a certain standard your whole life just to be, A plus, and only fit within four different career types, right? And I feel like a lot of people that transition out to real estate, they are, coming to that, I would say not that aha moment, but what you talk in the book as like your inflection point, right?
Mhm.
Sort of that moment that makes you just lose, that gives you that, fog, that you're kind of confused and not sure where to go next.
Yeah.
Can you just briefly touch on that actually?
So
So,
the fog phase specifically or the confusion?
yeah, the confusion. Hmm.
Oh, okay. So what happens is, in a lot of work settings, a lot of people usually experience something in their body, like something breaks, like physically, their back gives out, their something happens, because that shows you that you have been basically running your mental machine like at like let's just say lightning speed, but your body's like, oh my god, this isn't working for me. Oh my god, this is too much, right? And we are not just our minds, we are also our bodies. And so that moment of break is usually when people actually come to an awareness. Another moment of break is also like people getting laid off right now. It's like an opportunity, even though it's hard, right? It's an opportunity to be like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for so long. I don't even know who I am anymore, and can I maybe venture to be something new without it being just like me going back to my old survival, identity and just like trying to play the same roles I had before because of financial security. So like it's really just identifying that moment. I call it a lightning bolt moment. It's basically just like when things suddenly are like, this isn't working anymore.
Okay. Love that. Thank you. I'll leave that as a teaser for our next segment. We will be right back, folks. All right.
Hey, Ashley Cow here, taking a quick break from the episode. If you're enjoying it so far, please take a moment to like and subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. This will help us improve and reach other people just like you. So thanks for listening, and let's jump back into the episode. Okay, welcome back. So Amy, I want to pivot to just talking about, identity, money, and power. So why can someone who is already financially successful still not feel safe?
So financial success and psychological safety are two totally different systems. If the money arrives, but the identity that earned it, built around like proving or performing or never enough, doesn't change. If anything, when the money arrives, it justifies that version of you that earned the money in that way. So you might be wealthier than you used to be, but you're still running the old strategy, your old survival identity, and you'll be really scared of losing your wealth because there's this like hamster in your in your brain that feels like there's never enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, I feel that way a lot where it's like, oh, I can lose it the next day. And I have that mindset of like, just always save your money, save your money. And,
Mm,
it's what I was taught and stuff. But
right.
at the same time, it's like, how do you shift away from that eventually?
Right.
Um, and so I guess that kind of brings me to the next question. How do immigrant survival patterns show up in the way women approach money, risk, and wealth?
Right. So, as immigrants, we are so aware that this is an environment that we did not directly create or shape. We're the outsiders in this equation. So, for that reason, the stakes feel even higher. So, the immigrant survival is fundamentally about fear of losing what you have. And so the logical strategy is like, don't be too visible, right? Don't take up too much space or save everything, like you just said, Ashley, right? And those patterns make sense in the context that they were originally built for. But in the wealth building context, that same fear becomes a limitation. It becomes a question of how much risk you might be willing to take, or how visible you'll let yourself become, or how much you'll even allow yourself to have. Um, and the survival pattern that kept the family safe, right, when we were little, it's sometimes become a limiting factor in terms of what you're willing to reach for.
Yeah, so what is the difference between like building wealth from survival versus building wealth from alignment then?
So I would say that building from survival looks like accumulation and getting enough to feel safe and maybe to prove something to yourself or to others, and to not feel like you'll end up back where you started. And the measuring stick is always like external to you, right? Like your net worth or what others sees. And the problem and like the issue is like some of it isn't in your control. Like for instance, if the economy is in free fall, how is that now reflect on you, right? Because that now is like a threat to your portfolio if your identity is really tied to it. And that means it's a threat to you. Um, Building from alignment is um, is more like the journey itself has value, and you're making choices on what you actually want, and how you want to spend your energy, and what it feels like to create from your value set, and like the fullest expression of you in terms of what you as a human being can be. So like the outcome, it might not be 100% like obvious, right? But it's just like it matters to really understand where your place of satisfaction lives, And while like on the outside, it might look identical, right? Like maybe you'll have the same net worth and blah, blah, blah. It feels really different on the inside to have built from a place that feels authentically aligned with who you are.
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess there's no like clear-cut definition, but it's kind of like what you said earlier, where it's like you just know like that internal feeling. It either doesn't sit right with you or it does sit right. And so is it just kind of like an internal signal to yourself versus versus like some external like signal.
This is what I think. I think we are all gifted with one precious life, and the way we spend our time has to make sense for the purpose of why we are on this planet. So, how you spend that time is going to matter. And if it's just for the sake of making more zeros behind your name, that's one thing because it means something to you, certainly. But to actually spend your time also to do things that feel like what is your big why in terms of why you exist on Earth, that feels differently.
Yeah. Love that. Okay. Well, I think that's a good segue to just like, how do we like heal or redefine success now that we've identified some of these kind of uh, identities and survival identities? And so, what does authentic power look like when you're no longer operating from a place of survival? So,
Yeah, I think the difference in the feeling, right? So if we're talking about the difference between like what it feels interior on the interior, it doesn't it's the difference between like what you feel like when you're on a stage and you're performing for someone else's applause and approval, or if you're doing it for yourself. You stop performing competence for someone else's opinions. So you make decisions on what you actually think, not just to protect yourself and your position. You can disagree, about spending the next hour and how the person felt about it, right? But ultimately, it's about someone who's been in their survival identity for their whole career, and a lot of high achieving women have. It's really one of the hardest things that they'll ever do, which is really to own this deeper self, right? Because that's where the opportunity is.
yeah. So what would be like one pattern high achieving women should start paying attention to immediately?
Yeah. So like, when you kind of like look at the course of your day, or you reflect back at different parts of your career, like notice the level of energy that it took to perform that version of you. Like the version of you that's like composed and confident and capable. And then you have to kind of just ask yourself, who is it for? And is there a cost to it? Is there a version of you that you've been trying to cover up for in order to basically protect yourself and keep yourself safe? Um, and really just like what is it, what is the gap basically between that version of you versus who you actually want to be? So the version of that's been performing, but it's like versus the version of you that like wants to like actually arrive. Um, so basically just understanding that it's not a personal failing, it's just it's the survival identity doing its job, and it's really just noticing it honestly as where everything starts.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's more so like it's like you're separating yourself. Like that's not really your identity. You're just separating yourself from that identity eventually.
That's
Yeah.
right. So let me walk you through it. Like it's
Okay.
like people say it's my survival pattern or whatever. The reason I use the term survival identity together is because you've been so acclimated, or sorry, you've adapted so long into this version of self that you think it's your identity.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm always a people pleaser. I'm this, I'm that, right? But it turns out if you understand that it's an adaptation, then then it has an opportunity to be shifted. So then therefore it doesn't have to be like what some people call like personality. I don't
Mhm.
actually think that's a real thing. I actually think a lot of our conditioning shapes us to be who we are. So we have to disentangle this version of self from what we think is our identity.
That's so interesting. So like I've done therapy sessions where you try to separate yourself from a certain identity and then one of like the methods to help separate yourself is you name that other
That's
identity,
right. That's
right?
right. Mhm.
And you name it like an
That's right.
ugly, annoying ass name. And then that way you're like, oh, I'm not going to say a name because I don't want
Yeah.
somebody to be offended.
Yeah.
But like, you name that, and then
Right.
that way you kind of separate like
That's
yourself
right.
from that.
Right,
So,
right. Like the meta of this is like, we are not our thoughts, right?
mhm,
And I've done that same work also with clients
yeah.
as well. Like, we are not the thoughts. We're a human having thoughts, right? And so we don't have to just follow down the path of where like, oh, this, let's just say anxiety comes up and suddenly it gives us these crazy ideas, right? And then we don't have to follow down that path. We could just say, oh yeah, that is the fearful version of me that was trying to warn me, but it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be the one that runs the show.
Right. Cool. Okay, so like if someone listening to this episode or, realizing that they've built their entire identity around survival, what would you say? Like where would somebody start?
Yeah, so maybe start by identifying which pattern is running you, right? It's not just the survival identity isn't just one thing. My research helped me, realize that there's five core archetypes. So we talked about them a little bit. Like there's an analyzer, there's a people pleaser, there's like a controlling type, and then there's also some people who are like avoiders, like the people who kind of like pull back, and then there's also some people who are like disruptors. And truthfully, people are usually a combination of these two, right? You're not only one thing. And each of us have a different origin story, and being able to see yourself in context of where we come from is one of those steps, right? Like, so to be able to look back at like your childhood and actually look at the picture around you, not just your individual experience, and be like, yeah, I'm a girl in a patriarchal household. I am I'm an immigrant kid trying to make it in this, neighborhood, right? So like to be able to see that larger context around you when you look back, it helps you understand why you made the choices that you made. And then the remainder is really just helping you realign, like we talked about, realign with what matters to you in terms of your sense of purpose and your values and the who you want to be in the world. Um, and then basically getting into a practice that allows you to inhabit that version of you so that you could be that version of you in the long term. So I developed something called the Forma framework, which really helps people navigate this journey to this version of themselves that lives underneath the conditioning and the story. And it's really like helping people navigate that shift is really like, I think all of us as humans on this planet, like I think all of us really want to really like create a version of self that goes beyond just the fear narrative. And I think that would really be like, the gift that we could all share with each other. So the Forma framework helps people navigate that. I detailed all of this in my book, Survival Identity. And I also built an app that also helps people walk through the Forma framework. So you could also identify your own patterns and start to move forward.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I mean, I think that's a good teaser to the book, and Anita and I have read the book, and it is crazy how much I resonate with it. And so like we said in the beginning, these are like hard truths, but it's like it's good to face these truths and figure out how to unlearn it, like we talked about earlier, so that you can get to a more authentic self and you just live a happier life, right? And not feel
Yeah.
like combined into these different identities and stuff. So
We
love it.
gotta live, yeah, we gotta spend our time on earth doing stuff that we came to do instead of just living it for others.
Amen.
It's so random, but have you guys seen it? I think it's a Pixar short film called Pearl. She's like a ball of yarn. And so it's so I don't know why I kept imagining it throughout this whole episode. Is so she's a ball of yarn, pink ball of yarn, and she joins a startup company which is built by finance bros. And she's the only woman working in this company, and she starts to unravel literally because she's trying to conform to this macho whatever. And then she's like, okay, well, maybe I just need to adapt. And so she like knits herself a suit to look like the men. And then she starts acting like the men and all that stuff. but then she realizes like that's not her authentic self.
Right.
And so like, I don't know, you guys should watch it. It's like, I don't know, like a 20-minute short or something like that. But it's like spot on to just kind of what we talked about today. It's like you try to conform, you try to like build this identity to adapt, and then you realize that's not authentic. And so like you have to watch it and see the end, because it like she starts to change the workplace and influence the workplace
Right.
with her authentic self. And so very cool.
Can I say something about that? Yeah, I think this moment, especially as we're watching stuff melt all around us, I think this moment is asking us for a new version of leadership.
Yeah.
You know, in all respects, like whether it means a different version of leading so that we could change the workplaces, or like different ways of relating so that we could actually have something new. We can't have anything new if we copy and paste from the past. If we copy and paste structures of power that we had from the past, if we copy and paste the ways that we, you know, like the work cultures that we operate within, like if we're literally trying to create something new, then it's really asking us to lead from that authentic self, because we can't keep just recreating the patterns from the past.
Yeah. Love that. So Amy, how can people get a hold of your book and your app?
So if you want to check out the book you can find at survivalidentity.com. And if you actually want to do the work, come find me at transforma.me. So it's it's the word transform and then the letter A at the end, .me. And if you want to stay in conversation, I'm also on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Amy, Chiang, and you could find me that way too.
Awesome. And then what is the app called? Is it the Transforma?
Transforma.
Okay,
Transforma. Because it's built on the Forma model of change. And so I'm just put Forma and Transform together.
Cool. Love that. Well, Amy, thanks again for joining us on this episode. We are excited to just share this with other people, because I think a lot of people will resonate with it. And looking forward to seeing the success of your book. I mean, it's already successful in my mind, because it's so good. So
thank you. Thank you so much for having me again. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thanks, Amy.
Thank
See you
you.
next time.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the SARE Ladies podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, make sure to follow, share, and leave us a review. It helps more women in real estate find this community. And don't forget to connect with us at sareladies.com for more resources, stories, and support on your investing journey. Until next time, keep building, keep learning, and keep breaking barriers.